Fae Wars Part 4. So last night in my dream, I'm wandering through this Fae village, and it's just like the ancient times where one Fae per one tree, and the tree was producing everything that they needed. And many of the Fae that I noticed were kind of just like really in bad states, like their souls were in awful states. Many of them were they had recreated their earthly nightmares and were kind of like in their own little insane asylum. In their house, it was like their own little haunted horrors of their lifetimes in other places, and also the trauma that they haven't healed yet. And so I was walking around in this because I had woken up in my tree, in my little hut, and I was like, oh, I know this hut. I've seen this hut a lot in visions and in dreams. And so I decided that I was going to leave the hut. And I never realized, like, oh, I can leave this hut. I don't have to stay in it. And it's like a cute little underground burrow, kind of like what you would imagine a hobbit hut, a hobbit hole to be. And but I have like all these gardens inside, and I have all these magical items and books and maps and everything. And so I come out from under my tree because I live under the roots, and I'm in this village, and I realize everybody's got their tree, and I was like, this is really ancient, this is old. And so I'm walking around trying to talk to people. I actually see somebody I know, and I go into their house realizing, oh my God, this is a horror show. I need to leave here. And it was actually somebody I had known in the magical community. And I looked at and I saw this person had cast a curse on me, and I saw the curse. And so I broke the curse because it was like, that's not cool, you know? And I left the hut, their tree hut, and I started walking around the village, and eventually I met the constable. And so the constable is this, if you imagine like a Yorkshire Terrier becoming an elf, that's what the constable would look like. But he glows pure white, and with like a suit and a top hat and a cane. And he's like, hello, little one, you know what you doing around here? And I was just like, where am I? What is this place? And he starts chuckling. He's like, you are the first person to ask me that in about 1,000 years. And I'm like, really? He's like, yes, let's go. Let's get something to eat. And, and so I go and we sit down, and we're at a buffet, a banquet, and there's a lot of other beings that are like him. They're very different from me. And I was like, who are you and where are we? So he said that there are some light fae who did survive the wars, and they retreated back to source consciousness and were reborn from the light back into the fae realms. But they saw the amount of devastation that happened, so they created a bubble. And so here's the second part of the story. So what ended up happening because of all the bloodshed, because of all the trauma, the Fae petitioned source consciousness to basically cut off magic. Like, don't allow Fae to have magic at all. Nobody has magic. And there were only very special pools that only those who were connected to source consciousness knew existed, that they could find, that you could bathe in and retrieve your magic. But everybody else, nobody had magic. And what ended up happening was those Fae became gods. They became god Fae. So like people would pray to them for aid and help, and they would come in and help. And a lot of the fairy divine beings that we know here in this earth are also those Fae as well. They're just beings that reincarnated back into material reality in the Pleiades and the Fae realms. And they have access to these special pools and energies, and they're the only ones who can access magic. Everyone lost it. So also all of the technology of the Dark Fae stopped working as well. It became inert. There's no way to use it because it was cut off. So that ended up creating, there's a fraction of Fae in the Fae realm who began to become anti-God, and they actually became atheists. And they're very similar to humans, like absolutely similar. They continue to create crude technology like we have, because we have basically crude technology. We do not have fourth dimensional, fifth dimensional technology. So they created third dimensional technology to create, spaceships and to, like what we would expect as like Star Trek and stuff. And those are the non-magical Fae realms. But they rebuilt Fae society, they rebuilt their land, they healed everything, and they did grow in consciousness as living beings without the ability to wield magic in the world. But in doing so, they became very antagonistic towards the Fae gods. Number one is because they didn't know which Fae gods to trust, because half of them became vampires. So you have to remember, like a lot of the light Fae that ended up, even from source, they aligned with the vampires. So there's a lot of mistrust about like, well, I could summon a deity, but it might not be that deity. It might actually be a vampiric spirit that will drain the life force of me and everybody I know. So they just stopped being spiritual at all. They became very materialistic, but tried to live in harmony with their earth. And they're actually healing and doing really, really well. So what do you do about the rest of the Fae souls all around the cosmos and all the dimensions who are lost in a lot of trauma, who remember magic, and who are really struggling? Well, we have to be quarantined from the non-magical Pleiadian or Fae beings and from their collective consciousness. We are not allowed to talk to them until they're ready, because if we do, we could bring a lot of trauma to them they're not ready for, and also we're not ready for too. So it's almost like the souls of the Fae who are lost in the Fae world evolved on a different time and dimensional frequency as what I would call the atheist or the Pleiadian Fae, that are what people talk about when they have encounters with aliens. They're a different sort of frequency, but common. We all have a common connection point. And it was a long time ago when our souls had physical bodies that could fully channel the elemental forces of any material reality. So what the constable told me was that he was an emissary from Source, and he was an ancient Fae god that did their healing, returning back to Source, removing all of the darkness from the vampiric age and from the artifice age, and healing, returning to Source, and coming back and creating like a tiny little like dream bubble. It's central place for all of us Fae-born souls, Pleiadian souls, to go and to heal. So when we have dreams, we are dreaming of not only our own memories, but the collective consciousness of ancient Fae worlds. And what it's doing is it's helping us transmute that old energy and heal.